Well, good morning, everyone. A big, hearty, and warm welcome to City Hall, your City Hall, the seat of a local government, of your local government if you live in Toronto. This is where so many debates take place and where decisions are made affecting the lives of Toronto residents. Also, a hearty welcome to the Civic Lab TO curriculum session. This session is focused on the topic, the city's strategic priorities and the role of local government. We have students and professors here from all 8 higher education institutions in one place at one time. We hope that this becomes a great, grand opportunity for students to learn from senior City Hall staff, from your professors that I'll introduce in a minute, from your classmates, and from classmates from other colleges and universities in Toronto. I would call this a wow educational opportunity if you seize it. I will introduce the professors and the key organizers in a second, but as is fitting to this place and to this land, let's start with the land acknowledgement. As this meeting is both in person and virtual, and we are not all gathered in the same place, I recognize that this land acknowledgement may not be for the territory that you are currently on, for those who are on WebEx. We ask that if this is the case, you acknowledge the traditional territory you are on and the current treaty holders. For those of us in Toronto, I'd like to acknowledge that the land we are on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. My name is Joe Mihevc, and I'm a professor at York University and a city councillor in Spadina, Fort York on the waterfront. I will be your moderator for today's session. Other professors will be doing the same moderating role for the next 5 sessions that we will be having after today at City Hall. Just to provide a brief description of today's event. On the city side, the Civic Lab TO curriculum is presented by the Strategic Partnerships and the City Manager's Office within the City of Toronto. They are working in collaboration with 4 colleges, 4 universities, City of Toronto, that are represented here today. The key organizing folk from the city are Jeff Moore and Bhagavathi Kubaramsawai, joining us from the Strategic Partnerships Office with the City of Toronto. I know that I speak for all of us here, students and professors, expressing our thankfulness for them for the heavy lifting that they have done. And you know what? I'm going to ask them to stand up. They're right there, and let's give them an early applause for the good work that they have done. This course is a piece of a larger picture, just so you know. Civic Lab TO is a unique learning opportunity which is made possible through the collaboration and partnership work with Toronto's post-secondary institutions. You need to know that there's actually a senior partnership table comprised of the city manager and the presidents of all 8 universities and colleges. This key group of civic leaders is forging a path of partnership and innovation between the city on one hand and colleges and universities on the other hand. This work includes the development of a new model for the city and academia to work on a multi-partner, multidisciplinary research to inform city policies and programs. Again, this course fits into that larger agenda. The team here is very excited to be hosting Civic Labs TO here in Council Chambers. This is a unique learning space to be in, and we are thrilled to be sharing the space with our educational partners, wearing my City Hall hat. We know that some of you will become elected officials. Imagine that. Some of you will be so transformed by your experience here and by your course of study, the topics you are focused on to get your degrees, that maybe you'll want a job here at City Hall. Maybe this one, maybe another City Hall. We want you to be prepared for those possibilities by showing you what their work is all about and how a career in the municipal civil service can be rewarding. Or maybe you will learn about how democracy works or doesn't work, and how urban issues develop. Maybe you will become a better, more knowledgeable resident working to improve your community and neighborhood, all to the public good. We want to build a great city and a great region, and you are part of the longer-term plan to make that happen. A tremendous amount of planning has been taking place between the academic institutions in the City of Toronto that has gone into delivering this curriculum. The City of Toronto secured an amazing lineup of senior staff and policy experts for each of the 6 sessions that they will be delivering. With this being the first session, I would like to take the opportunity to welcome instructors from the 8 institutions. And I'm going to invite them to stand up when I say your name or as I'm rolling through the list. And then we're going to give them a big applause because we love our professors after the last one is mentioned. So from George Brown, we have Leslie Wee. From OCAD, we have Sarah Diamond. From Seneca, we have Gus Lynn Pelusi. I saw Gus up there. From Toronto Metropolitan University, we have Cherise Berta there. From U of T, we have Aditi Mehta there. From Humber, we have Elizabeth Fanuta somewhere here, maybe online. And I know that Shane Walker from Centennial is online. So that's your teaching staff for these 6 classes. Now, before I pass on the mic for today's session, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded, and after some advice from our privacy office, participants are asked, that's you folks, are asked not to share any personal information within the meeting if you are going to be one of those brave souls, and there's many brave souls here who are going to ask a question. This session will be available on the www.civiclabto.ca website, and your instructor will have access to it, and I'm sure we'll forward that link to you in the near future, sometime towards the middle, maybe the end of next week. If you have joined us here in council chambers, please note that we ask you to avoid joining the virtual WebEx webinar. It's okay to use your computer. I mean, this is a big debate in all our classes. It's okay to use your computer to take notes. It's not kind of cool if you're texting or doing social media or surfing around. So if you could do us all the honor, feel the energy of this place, take that all in. That's what we want you to experience while you're here. So open your computers, yes, but for the purpose of taking notes and not anything else. Okay, if you have joined us, washrooms are that way and that way. Feel free to use them. There will be a time for Q&A at the end of today's, the last 20 minutes. If you are joining virtually and would like to submit a question, do it in the Q&A function. For those in the council chambers, you may ask your questions during the Q&A portion of the session by using the laptop at the center. I think that's where Jeff is sitting right there. You can come down and ask a question there. We'll also have a person with a roaming mic to go around if you want to ask a question that way. Be brave, feel free, ask those questions. If you're using, for those who are sitting here, you can ask the question just by pressing the yellow button and then pressing it again. You'll see that the yellow button will go on, then shut it down by just pressing it again. Lastly, everyone joining us virtually, if you're in virtual land, will be muted during the event. Okay, so today we're going to hear from Tracy Cook, the interim city manager. The city manager is the most senior person in Toronto's civil service. The administrative buck, so to speak, starts and ends with the city manager, who manages about 30,000 staff at City Hall and closer to 60,000 if you take into account the city's agencies, boards, and commissions. Then we're going to hear from John Elvidge, City Clerk, City Clerk's Office, and Kelly McCarthy, Deputy City Clerk, Secretariat from the City Clerk's Office. The Clerk's Office is responsible for many things, but in a phrase, they are responsible for the smooth, transparent running of City Hall in all its complexity. They know better than anyone how things work around here. So I'll pass it over to the wonderful, indefatigable city manager, interim city manager, Tracy Cook.
Thank you. In this room, usually it's Councillor Mihevc, but I think I'm supposed to be calling you Dr. Mihevc today. I don't know. Or just Joe. Just Joe. Good morning, everyone. How are you? Okay, good. For whom is this the first time in City Hall? Oh, wow. Holy smokes. Almost everybody. I think everybody. Well, welcome to City Hall. Fabulous folks. And for those who are joining online, thank you for joining online, and hope you'll be able to take an opportunity in the future to come down and visit us in person. I always have to ask this question every time I'm speaking. Who here's from Scarborough? Yeah, Scarborough represent. Hillary, very nice. I'm surprised. Usually I get a lot more folks shouting out, right? Shouting out Scarborough? Yes, guys. I've got notes and I've got slides, but as people who know me know, I tend to not follow them. And I'd rather this be more of a dialogue. And I know we're going to get to that through the Q&As. So I will take a little bit of time because I think really the main event for today is going to be with John and Kelly. This is the first time I've ever had the opportunity to sit at the center table in this room. This is where the action happens. So you're going to have phenomenal time listening to John and Kelly and how they keep this city moving, especially with folks like me who just like to get up to microphones and start talking and talking and talking. Anyway, thank you all for being here. Just a little bit about me. I guess you want to know, who is this person talking to me and how did they come to be here? So as Joe, that's very awkward for me, mentioned, I'm currently the interim city manager. Our previous city manager, Chris Murray, is going to be moving on to other adventures after his term here. My base position is actually the Deputy City Manager of Infrastructure and Development Services. We're going to show an org chart and you'll see what that means. My journey here, and I think I've got a little slide that just tells a bit. I actually started my full-time working career as a police officer here in Toronto, over 18 plus years. And actually I was realizing back, I've actually attended 3 of the post-secondary institutions represented here. Centennial in my early days, Seneca to make up for a course that I blew in my Centennial day. I just admit that. And actually, what was Ryerson now is TMU for a certificate in business while I was on the police force. Anyway, so wonderful institutions you are all. Thank you. So I started my career as a police officer. Then I went to the private sector. I ended up being the director of security for Coca-Cola for Canada for about 7 years. And I went to a security company with security guards and was the area vice president there. And through those times in the private sector, and it wasn't very long, once I entered the private sector, I realized how much I missed public service. So 10.5 years ago, January of 2012, I had the good fortune to get the job here with the city as the executive director of municipal licensing and standards. And that's the unit within the city that deals with bylaw enforcement, business licensing, et cetera. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the cool things we do on some of those experience at the city overall and some of the cool things I've had the opportunity to do working for the city. Who all is interested in a job at the city? Oh, come on, people. We have a lot of phenomenal opportunities here. I like a double hands up there. That's great. Who's interested in joining as an elected official? A few. Who haven't decided yet? Who's going to be deciding after this session today? So let's make sure we make it riveting for you because this is a wonderful place to work. I think our next slide should show the organizational structure of the city. That's extremely hard to see. It's a bit of an eye chart. But this gives you a sense of how the city's organized. So as Joe mentioned, I'm currently the interim city manager, which is, he said, the most senior. I hope they didn't mean the oldest. You meant the oldest, yeah. I am the oldest, not quite, of the civil service or the public service side of the house. And of course, we've got the elected official side of the house that others will be speaking to. And we are organized across a number of service areas. There are 2 service areas, community and social services, that's led by a deputy city manager, Paul Johnson. And that's got services such as employment social services, housing secretariat, affordable housing, Toronto Fire, Toronto paramedics, a lot of the all the social development work, or most of the social development work we do, sits in his group. My base job, which is currently being filled by one of my people, is infrastructure and development services. So we've got what we call the hard services. So the things you see every day, the water, the garbage, the roads, the bylaw enforcement, city planning, determining how our city is going to be built and what that's going to look like. Toronto building, engineering, who does the work and install in investments in our infrastructure and huge portfolio. Gardner, big water projects. I've never had so many conversations about sanitary sewers in my entire working career or life, but I'll tell you, it is really interesting when you get to understand what it takes to make the city work. Then we've got our internal services, our support services with our deputy city manager, Josie Scioli. She's got corporate services, fleet, real estate, technology, which has been an incredible transformation for us lately arising from the pandemic. And then our financial services folks with Heather Taylor, who's our CFO, and she has all those financial accountabilities, including procurement, accounting, how we pay our bills, and our budget. The City of Toronto budget is approximately $16 billion per year between operating and capital. So it's pretty significant amount of money that we have to deal with, and Heather leads that. Certainly, this is the city proper and the way we're distributed. And as Joe mentioned, there are also agencies and corporations that the city has, different entities. Are some more arm's length than others. Toronto Community Housing, Toronto Police, Toronto Hydro. So they're all it's a bit of a complicated web when you look at how we've organized ourselves, but all for very meaningful reasons and to ensure the appropriate levels of governance happen over each of these agencies. So as Joe mentioned, between the city divisions, we're about 32,000 people across the agencies and corporations, around 29,000 or so. The biggest agencies, Toronto Transit Commission, of course, Toronto Police Service, and actually Toronto Public Health is our 3rd largest agency. And we've seen, and as Joe is sitting now on a table, our strategic command table, as we're going through the last 2+ years of the pandemic and the role that Toronto Public Health has played, and our Dr. Davila, who we all know and love. So it's a pretty expansive organization when you think about the number of services, and I just mentioned a few, that the city provides, and ensuring that the people who live, work, and play here have access to clean water, clean streets, accessible parks, transit. It's absolutely a phenomenal place to be and to be a part of all of that work. So as the city manager, and I'm not watching my time, so someone's got to poke me so I can get done quickly so the good stuff starts. Thank you very much. The city manager's office is the one I'm occupying currently while we search for a permanent city manager to take on the next term of council and beyond and lead the organization through transformation that we know we have all been under and need to continue. There are a variety of different functions under the city manager's office. Specifically, the partnership office is one, our executive administration, our strategic public and employee communications. I always have to look at that because they changed their name and I keep forgetting what to call them. But Brad Ross, who doesn't know Brad Ross? Does everybody know Brad Ross? Anybody watch the news? Brad's going to be very upset that none of you said you knew Brad Ross. I won't tell him. It's our secret. If he's not on Twitter, you don't see him or hear him, but he's there too. Anyway, so all of those higher end services that support the deputy city managers and the corporation overall with those things that are more corporate in nature. And of course, right now, our real big focuses are around the recent legislative change with Bill 3 and what does that mean to the organization with respect to the Strong Mayor Powers and Building Homes Faster Act, as well as our financial situation. As I mentioned, the city has got a massive budget because we deliver a massive amount of services that are not inexpensive to do. So our long-term fiscal plan as well is one of those very important things that they are working on, led out of the city manager's office and involving the rest of the whole organization, including the agencies and corporations. So as far as our priorities go, I don't know which slide. I've got a slide, strategic priorities there, fellas, or whoever's flipping the screen for me. We set out a corporate strategic plan about 4 years ago, talked about the corporate strategic priorities and those that are internal about being a well-run city and financial sustainability. But then also, why we're here and is to serve the public. And those areas that are of most concern for us to make sure that our city is the most livable, and I think biased, the best city in the world to live in. Born and raised in Scarborough, still live in the city of Toronto, and extremely proud. So when we look at our priorities, and we've got them structured around these 4 key areas, I mean, I think the single biggest challenge we've got right now is around housing, and what is happening in our city, and especially is exacerbated through the pandemic, those who have struggled, and ensuring that people have access to affordable housing for those who need supportive housing. And that's a huge priority of the mayors. It's a huge priority of our city. And I think we are at least leading North America on the efforts that we are taking to create opportunities for affordable housing for people. It may not be enough. It's never going to be enough. I think we've got a lot of room to grow. I mean, the city, you look at the number of cranes, I think we have the most cranes than anywhere in North America. Right, it is growing exponentially in all areas. It's absolutely phenomenal. So with that comes opportunity to ensure that we are building the type of housing that people will be able to afford. I know I've got 6 grandchildren. They're all littler guys, although the oldest one's 16 and he's this tall and I feel really small beside him. But I worry about how are they going to afford to live in the city. And I want them to be in the city because, as I said unabashedly, it's the best city in the world to live in. So housing for sure is for us. Keeping Toronto moving, the mobility. And I know we struggle with our traffic issues. And at the same, it's construction season, which is always hard, but our growth as well. That's why the investments in transit, and I will give credit to the province for stepping in and taking on the expansion projects that we are experiencing. That's in my base position. My transit expansion is one of my areas I work with the province a great deal on, and that's massive investment in public transit that the city's making. It's going to take us some years before we glean the benefit of it, but this is the generational thinking that needs to go into how we're building the city, right? With housing, with transit. So we're on the right path, and I'm very encouraged by that. The support, from an equity standpoint and social equity and economic resilience, what we do to support people in neighborhoods, making sure there are programs available for people who need them, and that we're giving people the best opportunities and access to opportunities for their own economic well-being. And of course, the thing that plagues us all, and many have referenced as the next crisis or the next pandemic, I guess, is around climate change and how that is affecting our city infrastructure. I know, I've lived in the city. I won't tell you how many years. It's my whole life. You can guess my age later. But when I was younger, I don't recall the flooding impacts we used to see that we are seeing now. Every time there seems to be some rain, you got the Parkway closed, you got Bayview Avenue Extension closed, you've got neighborhoods being flooded, and a lot of that is the volume, how much of these types of once in a lifetime or once in 50 year are becoming far more frequent weather events, and our ability and our infrastructure and how that can manage it. So how we are investing in climate change, what we are doing to make sure, we're mitigating the impacts from a resilience standpoint. I think when I think about the things that are important to us, and you think of all the things we do, and there are hundreds and thousands of things that we do, if you carve it into the 4 main buckets, this is what we've done. And this is how, when we look at being outcome-based, where we need to focus our efforts. So why work in municipal government? So if I haven't just given you all that and you're saying, this is all sounding kind of interesting, it is, like I say, I started in public sector with policing. I went to private sector, and I had a conversation with a group of rising leaders with Civic Action yesterday. And, just talking through what drives you, what are you passionate about? And, I enjoyed my time at Coca-Cola and Securitas, great people, hardworking. At the end of the day, what the outcome was profitability. I think I said I drank so much Diet Coke, they just gave me a job, but clearly that didn't work. So I just found that I wasn't driven by the profit statement at the end of the day. And it was really about seeing what I've contributed to, what the efforts I've put in to my work and what that's delivered for others. So if that tweaks your fancy, you follow your passion, and you might be surprised. I never imagined I would have done it. When I started out, I ever would have done anything other than policing. So I went from cop, 5 minutes, I'll be done in 2 minutes. Give it 3 minutes back. I went from cop to pop to now top of the city's organizational structure. That just kind of came to mind. And how I never would have imagined I would have gotten there. I never thought this was where I'd be. And the opportunities that I've had. And I'll touch just real quickly on some of the cool stuff we do. So we can flip the slide. So these are just some pictures from a presentation I did elsewhere when I was talking about municipal licensing and standards. And the top left, I guess for you, is this room. It's where you all are. And those are a lot of people from the taxi industry. Who uses Uber here? Yeah, you're welcome. When Uber came into Toronto, it was a lot of disruption and a huge disruption in the taxi industry. But we got them regulated and they're operating now. It's been 6 years since we stood in this room and actually permitted Uber to operate with regulation that ensures public safety. So pretty proud of that. I was sorry I didn't have any pictures of chickens, Joe. We did enjoy a lively hour-and-a-half debate in this room about backyard hens, and you can feel free to ask Professor Mihevc about that conversation. But also Airbnb, we're here dealing with the cannabis, through cannabis legalization. Those are just some of the things that files I dealt with. Specifically, Rent Safe TO is our inspection program at rental apartment buildings to make sure the standards are maintained. Well, I think about the job I'm in now and as I mentioned, the infrastructure, what we're doing in the Portlands. For those of you who know the bottom end of the city, the Portlands, Cherry Beach, the soccer fields, huge development opportunity coming down there. There are going to be multi-billions of dollars invested over decades. Like this is generational as well. Development opportunity there. We got $1.25 billion going into a flood protection project to make that opportunity happen in the future. It's just absolutely staggering the amount of work that this city and the staff in the city does. We've got engineers, we've got architects, we've got planners, we've got bylaw enforcement. We have got opportunities for absolutely everyone in any field that they have an interest in and opportunities to move. So that's a little bit about the city, a little bit about me, how I ended up being here. I didn't follow any of my notes. So if I missed something, hopefully we'll catch it in Q&As. But thank you very much for your time and look forward to talking a little bit more later. I think I'm introducing John and Kelly, or are you? All right. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Tracy. See, she is indefatigable. Next is John Elvidge and Kelly McCarthy from our clerk's department.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Joe, and welcome everybody. Welcome to the council chamber here at City Hall. You know, this room has been a witness to history, local history, since it opened in 1965. And I think about all the people who have come through here, people who sat on this council, people who served as mayor, some who went on to be members of parliament, some who went on to be cabinet ministers in different governments, some are now senators. What happens in this room has mattered and continues to matter, and we welcome you here today. It's one of my favorite spaces. I have a desk upstairs in the tower, but this is also my desk once a month or more frequently, and it's one of my favorite places to be. So welcome here today. Kelly and I are going to split this presentation, and we're going to talk about three things. I have a slide with the three things on it, just to give you a bit of a roadmap of where we're going. We're going to start with, if the slide can advance, but I'll tell you what's on it anyway. We're going to start, I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of the city clerk and the unique nature of the position that I occupy and that about 350 people share with me the duties of. Kelly is going to give you an overview of some governance fundamentals. So I think in the journey you're on in this course, we hope to equip you with some things today, the building blocks of city government, so that as you're in the weeks ahead, you'll know which rocks to look under for more information, more detail, and more sources. But we'll do that. And then the last thing I'll wrap up by just giving you a little preview about some changes that are ahead, kind of coming into effect in November 15th, the start of the term. You may or may not have read, maybe you've read about the issue of stronger powers for the mayor of Toronto and the mayor of Ottawa. And I'm going to give you a little 101 on that as well. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here this morning. I guess since Tracy did, I guess Kelly and I will say a little bit about our journeys here as well. I have worked for the city for, this is actually my 33rd year, which is pretty hard for me to say those words out loud. It's gone very fast. In my most of my working life, I would say the most significant portion of my working life have been with the city. And I've had three careers within the city. And I think, just to amplify on things Tracy said about the great thing about working here, is that it is possible to have a job for 33 years and with one organization, one employer, but really do different things and have, careers within careers, as opposed to, doing the same thing for those 33 years. So there are, as she said, there are so many roles, so many programs, so many departments that it's possible to navigate a career within a municipal government for a considerable period of time. So I've had three roles here. I started in culture. I was a cultural affairs officer. First job I had here, which was a great introduction to kind of the toolkits of working here, a little bit of policy, a little bit of grant making. I was a grants officer for a while, and some community development work. And those are, I think those were three great skills to get in those parts of my career, I should say. Second part of my career was I worked in the city manager's office. I worked for about 5 city managers ago, I think, but nevertheless, I had a great portfolio there working on mostly machinery of government type projects. And we're going to talk a lot about machinery of government here today. So it's been one of the things that I've worked on for a long time, how the city works. And then I've been in the clerk's office for the third part of my career, at first as deputy clerk and now as city clerk. So again, the journey here, there's lots of opportunities in the municipal world. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the role of the clerk's office. It is an unusual role. You're sitting in the 4th council chamber right now. On the slide is a photograph of the 2nd council chamber. That was, if anyone's been to the St. Lawrence Market, maybe you've been upstairs to the Market Gallery. It was a small art gallery or display space there. That was the council chamber. So right at the front of St. Lawrence Market on Front Street. That's the second city hall. And, a lot of professions claim to be the oldest profession. But when it comes to the municipal world, the clerk's profession is the oldest profession. It's a job that's been around. It predates even the city of Toronto. It's a part of our, our governance tradition, the deliberative bodies, the ones that exist now, the ones that existed in the 19th century and the 18th century and further back, were supported by a clerk of some sort. So it's a job that goes back quite a long way. And it is, as a result of that, as you'll see in a second, the city clerk's job has like, it's been like a glacier. I guess it's picked up a lot of stuff along the way as it's moved along. So there's a lot of responsibilities that are assigned to the clerk in law, and it's what makes the job fun job. Last year when we did this session and Chris Murray was here, I think I said to Chris that I had the best job of the city. He claimed he had the best job. I think maybe I do for that reason. There's so much interesting things that goes on. So now, interesting thing about the clerk's job is that the clerk is appointed by city council and reports to city council for the majority of the programs and services that we provide. It requires a nonpartisan, a neutral posture in the job. So I'm not, I and the 350 people who work with us, we're not devoted to the mayor of the day or a majority of councilors that maybe sit on a council of the day. We are neutral, nonpartisan. Our job is to help and support all actors in the governance process. I'll talk about that more in a second. As I mentioned, there's something like 300 mentions of the clerk in legislation, everything from if you're going to fly a helicopter over the city for certain purposes, you have to tell the clerk. If a utility has to cut people off, is going to cut people off from electricity, they have to notify the clerk. There's a whole bunch of weird and wonderful things that come in through our mailbox every day that are related to some obscure section somewhere in legislation that says the clerk is to be informed or the clerk is to do something about it. One of the responsibilities that falls in Kelly's area, for example, we always laugh about is abandoned cemeteries. So we're also in the abandoned cemeteries business. Again, this is a result of like 180 years of legislation that's been introduced in Ontario, assigning odd jobs to the municipal clerk. Interesting thing also about the job is that we carry out some things independently of the council, and in some cases even independently of Tracy. And those include the election, for example. So the clerk is also the chief electoral officer, and I'll talk a little bit more about the election in a second. And in that regard, obviously members of council are also candidates, or unless they're retiring, of course, but they are candidates. So it's not appropriate for council to determine how an election is run. So in law, that's vested in the clerk to carry out the election in accordance with the Municipal Elections Act, which is the provincial statute. The clerk is also here the head, an unfortunate word, but anyway, the head of the institution for the purposes of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. And again, there are certain duties there that I carry out independently of the public service and of council with respect to access to information in particular. And the clerk is also the division registrar, an obscure old-fashioned term, but for the purposes of the Marriage Act and the Vital Statistics Act. And for those services, issuing marriage licenses, marrying people, issuing burial permits, these are all the sort of mundane day-to-day things that have to get done. For those things, I'm actually responsible to the Deputy Registrar General of Ontario for the way those services are delivered. So the clerk's got this kind of interesting blend of different responsibilities. We'll go to the next slide. Now, I talked about neutrality, and this slide is pretty critical to understanding how we behave in our office. We sort of see the world divided into three sets of actors who are participating in local democracy. So the elected officials who have their own duties and powers and duties that are set out in law. We have the public service, city officials that are led by Tracy and include our agencies and boards as well. And then, of course, the public. Then the public have rights and privileges with respect to the legislative process and respect to decision-making here at City Hall as well. And so our space, it's the tiniest space, but it's that little space where the Venn diagram meets in the center. That's kind of the space that the clerk occupies. That's one of the ways we like to look at our job. Our job is to make sure that all three parties, all three sets of actors in the local decision-making process are able to carry out their business, or carry out their duties, I should say, and exercise their powers, and be able to do that without us, putting our thumb on the scale to try and tilt something in a way that we think is the right way, or the right policy, or the right decision. That's not our concern. We're citizens. As private individuals, we have views, of course, but when we are in our clerk's role and when we're on the job, our job is to facilitate the decision-making that goes on in this room and everyone being able to play their part. So we like to say we're not loyal to any one of those three sets of actors, but we're loyal to the system overall. And a good day for us is when public service, elected members can come together in this chamber, a decision can get made with good, timely information, with everyone having an opportunity to exercise their rights that are guaranteed to them in the law. To us, that's a good day. The outcome, to Uber or not Uber, to have backyard hens or not have backyard hens, professionally, we don't care. What we care about is that the decisions are reached in a proper and fulsome manner. That's a kind of an interesting role because sometimes this puts us into conflict. One of the services that we provide, for example, is we help members of council with their strategy in this chamber. One of the services we provide is we draft proposals and motions that members make in the chamber. And sometimes those are, those conflict with the professional views of the public service. And, it's not uncommon sometimes for us to help Councillor Mihevc, let's say, with a motion. And it goes up on the screen in the meeting. And then all of a sudden, one of our colleagues in the public service comes to us and says, "You knew that Mihevc was going to move that? And you didn't warn me, or you didn't try to talk him out of it. It's such a dumb idea," whatever that might be. And our position always is, yes, we knew about it, but it's not our job. It's not our job to intervene in the politics here. Our job is to make sure that politics can happen. Okay. I think do I have one more slide? Next slide. Oh yeah, here's just a slide. You can take a look at that, take away and look at that later. Here's the city clerk's office today. The 5 areas, 4 deputies and 1 chief of protocol who had these organizational units. And it'll give you, it's kind of hard at the back of the room, I'm sure, to read that, but you'll see there's many bullets. And so that underscores my point that there's many, many interesting services that we provide. And you can take a look at that at your leisure and get some more information. Okay. With that, I think I'm turning it over to, no? Oh, elections. I'm going to talk a little bit about elections. Thanks. Next slide. So it is an election year, 2022. And if we go to the next slide, I'll give you a little bit of facts and figures about the Toronto election. We're the 4th largest municipal election in North America. And I think we're the 6th largest election in Canada, if you include the provincial elections and the federal election. Numbers are a bit staggering, even to me. These numbers are staggering. So, we have about 1.9 million eligible voters in Toronto. And to make sure that they can all cast their vote on election day, we have about 1,500 voting locations in schools and community centers and churches and apartment lobbies all across the city. We have just hired 15,000 people to work on voting day, which is a major task, as you might imagine. And this year, there's going to be advanced voting for 8 days in Toronto. And if you don't live in Toronto, you live in another Ontario municipality, and then there's a similar exercise going on in your community as well this year. So the election, I'm happy to answer any questions about the election later if you have any. Again, it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's something that we conduct in a neutral way. On the next slide are listed the principles of the the Ontario Municipal Elections Act. And this is sort of the guidebook that we use to conduct an election and ensure that the council who is elected on October 24th can govern with legitimacy. Well, that's what we want. We want there to be no question that the people who are elected and sitting in this chamber on November 1st or November 15th, I should say, when the term starts, they got there fair and square. And that's our #1 focus in the next 8 to 10 weeks. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, who's going to talk about the building blocks 101.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit about me. I have been here with the city for, it'll be 13 years in October, which is again, hard to believe. And I have an educational background in political science. I don't know if there are any political scientists in the room here, hopefully some of you. So I'm a bit of a governance nerd from the get-go. So I did my BA in political science and then went on to do graduate studies in public administration and city planning, believe it or not. So, and I entered the city through a gateway program called the Toronto Urban Fellows Program. So it is a program for recent graduates of master's and PhD programs. It's a small program. It enters about 15 people into the city every year. So those of you pursuing graduate studies and you want a gateway to get into the city, that's something to take a look at once you're at that point. It's a very, very good program and it's a unique way to get into the city. But again, you don't need a graduate degree to work here. There's lots of different jobs and opportunities here. Again, to John's point, you can have, 10 different careers in the same employer because of the diversity of the services that we provide here at the city. And it's a very cool place to work. And I sit down here at center table with John on a monthly basis to run the city council meeting. And it's, the second coolest chair in the building, I think. So very excited to have you here in our house. And I know that for most of you, it's your first time here in the council chamber, but have any of you watched a city council or committee meeting online maybe? Okay, some hands are up, okay. By the next time you're in here, so I think that's 2 weeks from now, or you're back next week, maybe more hands will be up in the air. Maybe I'll inspire you to go and check it out, because what I'm going to tell you is that all of our information is online. We have a very open government here and you can take it all in. So, okay. So just to get started with some of the fundamentals is that the city is a creature of provincial legislation. So we only exist because the province created us. So that's where we get all of our responsibilities and, the legislation that governs us, one of the big pieces is the City of Toronto Act, which came into effect in 2006. And again, recognizing that Toronto is Canada's 6th largest government, we were given special legislation to give us broad permissive legislative framework to achieve, a lot of these objectives. So it says here, may provide any service or thing that the city considers necessary or desirable for the public. That's pretty broad. Tracy talked about some of the examples of the services we provide, and the list goes on and on. It is amazing how many different lines of business the city is in and how it touches your day-to-day lives, like really, really, really impactfully. So, the one asterisk here is that it must not conflict or frustrate a provincial or federal act, regulation, order, or other legislative instruments. So even though the city is given broad legislative authority to do things within its jurisdiction, we can't do something that the province, that's like specifically in provincial jurisdiction. So like we can't run hospitals or something that's specifically within federal jurisdiction. So, even though airports are on municipal land, we don't run the airports. So those types of things. So again, lots of broad authority, but there are some limits on what we can do. Okay, so there are a variety of provincial statutes that govern what we do here. John and I both sort of mentioned the City of Toronto Act as the broad framework. It's what puts us into existence here and governs a lot of what we do. John also talked about the role of the Municipal Elections Act and his role as the chief electoral official. So I won't go into too much detail there. He also mentioned the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. It's called different things in different jurisdictions. We refer to them as FOI requests here. So that's something that members of the public, if you want to have access to information about city decision-making, then you have all sorts of entitlements under that legislation for access to the information that's generated here. The Municipal Conflict of Interest Act establishes rules for members of council and members of our local boards to declare their interests in certain matters when they have a personal interest in a matter that's related to the business that's being conducted here. The Planning Act is another big one. Tracy sort of mentioned that because planning falls under her portfolio, but the way that the city is shaped and how we build it out is guided by the principles of the Planning Act. If there are any planners in the room, you should be very familiar with that. Same with the Ontario Heritage Act. So there's, certain rules around what we can and cannot do to our heritage buildings. And this is just a snapshot. There are many, many acts. I mean, John described some of them as well, but the Building Code Act, there's a whole bunch of acts that govern the things that go on in the city besides just the City of Toronto Act. Okay, so into the actual composition of our council here. So the city is governed by a 26-member council. There are 25 ward councillors and 1 mayor. So the city is divided into 25 wards. We once had 44 wards. We now have 25 wards. That was a big change at the start of this term. And the mayor is elected by all eligible voters in the city. And I think, John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the mayor is elected by the largest number of voters in any jurisdiction in Canada. Okay, I got that right. So that's pretty big when you think about it. I mean, if you think about the number of eligible electors, around 1.9 million, and the mayor is elected citywide. And so the mayor, that position is elected by the most number of electors. That's pretty incredible given, that just speaks to how large the city of Toronto really is. It's enormous. So the ward system, and I'll get to the ward map here in a second, or maybe we can show it just to give you some context. Our wards are currently aligned with the federal and provincial ridings. So there's 25 of them. The average ward size is approximately 117,000 people. That's larger than some municipalities, and that's just, in one of our wards. So it's a pretty incredible job that our members of council have to represent that many constituents in one ward, especially, again, given the variety of things that city council is responsible for and the programs they're responsible for delivering. So just think about that. I'm not trying to discourage anybody from running for elected office, but that is a lot of responsibility on the hands of the elected officials. The term of office is 4 years. So as John said, it's an election year. We're in the 4th year of our term of office, and the new term starts on November 15th. So we will have a new council, and they will get down to business starting in November. Okay, so for practical purposes, for legal purposes, the powers of the city are exercised by bylaw. Now, if you think about every single decision that the city has to make, they determine how much I make, they determine what my role is. If city council had to make every single one of those decisions, we would be in this chamber nonstop. So for practical purposes, we do delegate at least a lot of responsibilities to various people and bodies. There's some things that can't be delegated. So city council reserves the right to, there's like major planning matters that only city council can make a decision on that can't be delegated to a member of Tracy's staff, for instance. So that's set out in legislation. But other than that, for practical purposes and administrative purposes, a lot of things are delegated down to staff or other decision bodies. Some city officials exercise statutory authority that's not governed by city council. The city clerk is one of those positions, especially for the purposes of the election. Our chief building official, the fire chief, there are lots of city officials that get their authority from pieces of legislation that city council can't necessarily change or interfere with. So the next slide is just some examples of how city council delegates authority to city officials or other bodies. Our municipal code is where we take our sort of frequently referred to bylaws and we codify them so that there's an easy place for you to go and reference, like licensing is a bylaw or is a municipal code chapter. So you can go and actually find the rules related to those programs and easily be able to look up how those things operate. So a lot of our bylaws actually give delegation to city officials to carry out some of the duties to deliver the programs and services. Our procedural bylaw is what guides the city clerk's office and the city council in its deliberations. So there's some delegation of authority there to certain committees and other bodies to carry out certain duties. There are lots of policies that city council adopts on a regular basis. And again, if you're going to adopt a policy on backyard hens, keep picking on backyard hens, Councillor, I apologize. But for instance, so, city council isn't going to manage that program, right? That's delegated to staff. There's enforcement, there's staff who actually come up with the policies, programs, those types of things. So for practical purposes, once city council adopts a policy, a lot of the action to take effect is done by the city staff. There's also, terms of reference, relationship frameworks, and shareholder agreements. Tracy talked about some of our agencies, TTC, Toronto Police Services, Toronto Hydro. We have relationship frameworks and shareholder agreements with some of those bodies to basically delegate authority to them to deliver certain services on behalf of the city. So the TTC has, full responsibility of delivering transit services in the city of Toronto, for example. This is the next picture is one of John's favorites to show. It's from a North York bylaw, and it's actually the approval of all sorts of administrative things. And so it's an example of, North York hadn't delegated some of these very administrative matters by this point in time. So if you can imagine a city council, our city council meets, and I'll get to this in a little bit, but, 2 to 3 days a month from, 9:30 until 6. That's a long meeting, and we deal with hundreds of items at each meeting. If we had to deal with all of the administrative things that go on, again, like I said, we would be here nonstop. So for practical purposes, we are not approving snow blowers and the purchase of garbage bags as line items at the city council. You're welcome. Okay, the next slide is talking about the delegation to our community council. So we have a series, there's 4 community councils. They're standing committees of council that consider items that are related to local and neighborhood matters. They are composed of the members of council for that geographical area. So there's Scarborough, North York, Toronto and East York, and Etobicoke York. So all of the members that are in those wards sit on that decision body. And they have delegated matter on some local items. So think about speed humps or speed limits on local roads. It's probably, I guess the principle behind it is that the councillors who represent Scarborough probably have a better understanding of where a speed bump should go in Scarborough than a councillor in Etobicoke, for instance. So city council has delegated authority for the community councils at the local level to make some final decision-making on truly local matters that can be delegated. Okay, the next slide talks about the fact that our system is built on the principles of openness and transparency. So all council and committee meetings are open to the public. There are very limited exceptions, and all of the documentation that supports the decision-making process here at the city is open to the public, again, with very limited exceptions. So I won't get into the details of the limited exceptions because I don't think that it's completely relevant right now, but if you think about, if we're going to be hiring an interim city manager or appointing an interim city manager, that there's some personal information that's required to be distributed to members of council in order to make that decision. So that's kept confidential until council makes a decision, and then it's released publicly, and that's how we know Tracy is our interim city manager. So, or if you're doing a land transaction, we're going to buy a piece of land or we're going to sell a piece of land, you probably don't want to transmit to people what you're willing to pay for it or accept for it. So things like that can remain confidential. But in general, most of what goes on in here is done in the public domain, both in the meeting context and in our legislative documents as well. So we take a lot of pride in that. If you ever hear, you're all going to go and watch council and committee meetings, but if you hear them talking about going in camera, they're talking about going into a closed session of city council. And if you are from another municipality and you watch city council meetings there, they may go and spend a lot of time in camera. We do not. We pride ourselves on spending the least amount of time in closed session as possible. Again, that gets back to the principles of openness and transparency, making sure the public has access to the information that council is using to make decisions on your behalf. So we're very proud of that. So, you know, you may occasionally come across a council meeting where we've gone in closed session. It doesn't happen at every meeting, and it's actually, the sessions aren't entirely long. So very, very proud about that. And our rules, our procedure bylaw that I sort of alluded to later, provide an opportunity for public participation. So again, having the public be able, it has a role, as John described, the public has a role in our process, and we invite members of the public to speak to any item that's on a committee agenda. So if you are passionate about a topic and it's in front of a committee for debate, you can sign up through the clerk's office to make a presentation to the committee. It's you get 5 minutes to address the committee on whether you're in favor of the proposition or against it, or if you have an idea that they may want to consider in their deliberations. So that's something to look out for as you start your civic life here. We don't have public presentations at City Council. We've delegated that down to the committee level here. And we also accept written submissions. So any person who wants to put something in writing to council about their thoughts or positions on a matter, again, as support, opposition, or, you know, a new idea, you can write to us and we will actually enter that communication into the public record against that agenda item. So that's how the public participates in the process. And one thing I'm quite proud of, and it's sort of a pandemic innovation, is that our council and committee meetings happen during the day. And previously, before the pandemic, if you wanted to participate and you wanted to watch the meeting live and you wanted to make a presentation to the committee, you actually had to come down to City Hall or to the Civic Center where the meeting was happening. And you had to sit there and wait your turn and appear in person in front of the committee meeting. And because we were running remote meetings for so long during the pandemic, we started to allow members of the public to participate remotely. And now we've allowed them to turn their video cameras on and allow them to share content in our WebEx platform. And I think that it has made the meetings more accessible for the public. We've had a lot more interest, a lot more people participating remotely, even when we opened City Hall back up. So I think that that has been a huge improvement for public participation in our process as a result of what we've all been through over the last 2.5 years. So for practical purposes, we use a committee system to manage the council workload and volumes. It's, again, a tremendous amount of business that goes through the city council and committee system. So we break it up into smaller groups to process the business of city council. So this is the current council and committee system. So there's city council, we have the community councils, like I talked about. There's 4 policy standing committees. There's an executive committee that's chaired by the mayor. And then there's some special committees at the top. The audit committee, the striking committee considers members' appointments to various bodies. The civic appointments committee considers public member appointments to various bodies. The Board of Health has a direct reporting relationship to council as well. So this is sort of in flux. For the new term, it may look the same, it may not look the same. John can get into a little bit of that when he talks about some of the new powers that are being given to the mayor, but that's what the system looks like now. And that's sort of the principles of what our system is based on. And the principle is that the new business of the council starts at the committee cycle. So again, because public presentations are only allowed at the committee, so it's a really strong principle that the new business starts in committee, because that gives the public the opportunity to make presentations. It allows for more detailed scrutiny of the items. The committees are composed of, 6 members of council who can spend a bit more time and detailed scrutiny and debate about the items that are there. Now, there are rules where you can bring urgent new business to the city council floor. And once you dive into all of our information, our legislative information webpage, you'll find sections called new business and member motions, where city officials and elected officials have the opportunity to bring very urgent matters directly to the council floor, bypassing the committee system. There's a bit of a higher test there. It's supposed to meet a test of urgency. In some cases, it takes a vote of a majority or 2/3 member of council to allow the item to be debated at council without first going through the committee system. But the majority of our business starts at committees for those openness principles. And the next slide is just sort of an overview of sort of how business travels through the system. So, you have reports from city staff, reports from our agencies and corporations, proposals from members of council. Sometimes city council sends things to committees to give more consideration to. So that's sort of what feeds into the committee system. Then it's considered by the committee. The community councils have some final decision-making authority on some of those matters, but for those that they don't, they transmit their recommendations up to city council. City council debates those items. Again, we collect some new business items that meet a test of urgency at the city council meeting. And then once city council makes a decision, there are bylaws that are passed to give effect to the decision-making. And then city staff go and implement the decisions of the council. Okay, city council meets on a monthly meeting cycle 8 to 10 times a year. So again, the committees are sort of at the front end of that. We have a week left for our agencies and boards to meet, and then city council meets for 2, sometimes 3 days at the end of the cycle to consider all the business that is collected from those channels. A lot of what we do here, and what you'll notice when you all go to watch council and committee meetings, is that a lot of our business is adopted on a consent basis. So city council only debates a small fraction of the business that's transacted here at the city. And again, it's hundreds of items per month. So that is a lot of business to churn through. And some of it is very transactional and some of it is very straightforward. And so it's easy for councilors to say, I don't need to debate this. I don't need to make any changes to this. I think we're good to go ahead and just adopt this. And so a lot of those items are what we call adopted on consent. So these are some pre-COVID numbers, but I think the trend still stands. It's about 45% of the items are adopted right off the top without any debate. It means council is happy with the way that it is and doesn't need to do anything further with them. Another 44% of our items, may get what we call held by members of council for, to ask questions or to make amendments to. But some of those, sometimes they hold it because they have a question. They want to get some more information from Tracy about what this actually means or how it's going to be implemented. And sometimes because of our 2 to 3 day meetings, they can get those questions answered offline. And then they don't need to debate the item publicly. They can release it. And when you're watching city council meetings, you'll see a lot of that happening after the recesses of the meetings, people releasing the items that they don't need to hold on to debate. And then those are just adopted, which leaves about 11% of the items, which is what city council ends up debating. And again, there's some items where every single member of council will have something to say about an item, and maybe it's only 1 or 2 members will have something to say about an item. They don't have to speak to every item, but they can speak to every item. So you'll notice that again when you start watching the council meetings. And okay, the order of debate. So again, just to aid you in watching the meetings, because you're all going to do it, is that sometimes there's an optional staff presentation. They aren't as frequent as they used to be, but you can, on a complex policy issue or something that requires a bit more explanation, staff may provide a presentation to the committee or to council about the subject matter. Again, public presentations up to 5 minutes for members of the public to address the committee. Then members can ask questions of city staff on the proposals. That happens a lot. So again, when you're watching those meetings, that first round of questions is usually to city staff or agency staff. Then members can either speak to the item. That's where they can place amendments. We call them motions. But if they want to amend something or do something different with it, maybe it needs to be referred back to staff for more consultation or for some more work. Or, maybe they just want to add, an additional direction to staff or change a 5 to a 4 or whatever it is that they want to do. That's their opportunity to do that in the committee process. And then once all the members have spoken, then they vote on the motions and the items. And then it either goes to city council or it gets referred off to staff or those types of things. So the last slide, I'm not going to go into too much detail on because I think that it's been covered quite a bit by Tracy and touched upon by John, but a lot of our services and functions are delivered by agencies, you know, TTC, Toronto Police, Toronto Hydro, the Parking Authority, so Green P, Bixby, well, not Bixby Bikes anymore, Bike Share. Yeah, Bike Share. And all of those have local boards, so it's the same principles apply. They're all, most of them are supposed to have open meetings. You can attend those board meetings and watch those board meetings online. So, and lots of members of the public are appointed to our city boards too. So if you don't necessarily want to be an elected official, there are opportunities for you to get involved with the board. So we have members of the public sitting on the police board, on the TTC board, the zoo board. So there's sort of an agency for everybody and every interest out there. So that's also something to look forward to participate more directly in your local democracy. And the last slide, you can take this back with you. It's sort of how to follow us online. All of our meetings are streamed to YouTube. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. All of our meetings, we index the items on our toronto.ca website. So you can, if you're interested in a particular matter, we have it linked so you can go directly to that matter instead of trying to find it in the 3 days worth of debate. So toronto.ca/council is where all of our legislative documents and information lives. It has links to our social media accounts. You can follow us on Twitter and all that fun stuff too. So there we go. And I think I'm handing it back to John briefly to talk about. You are? Okay.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, John. Thank you, Tracy. Those were excellent presentations. We're going to be moving into question period, but I have an idea. For 30 seconds, but not more than 30 seconds, stand up, get your whatever is out, and turn around and meet someone who's not from your college or university and just say, "Hi, I'm John. Hi, I'm Sally. Catch you later." Just for 30 seconds. Yes, he is. I'm going to do the informal question. Okay. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. We're really trying to make this a 1.5 hour, 90-minute presentation, and we want, because we know people are busy and that kind of thing. So now is the time for you to ask your questions. If you're online, you can put it in the chat function, and we will find a way to get it to me to ask folks. If you are open to coming to the mic where Jeff is sitting, there's a mic right there. We have a roaming mic that can go around. You can ask your questions that way. If you feel more comfortable and you want to sit in the counselor's seat, Jeff, maybe put your hand up. You can ask the question by sitting there. That's actually my seat, by the way. And yeah, those are the two methods in this council chambers. And the third method is if you are online, if you're watching online, just put it in the chat function and someone will bring that question to me. Just to get you warmed up, I'll ask the first question and it'll be to John Elvidge. And by the way, if you do want to watch City Council meeting, the next one is going to be on September 28th. Go to toronto.ca, scroll your way over. You'll find a way to basically access it online, and you can watch the show. Bring some good coffee. Okay, so John, here's a question to you as the city clerk, or Kelly. What is the biggest challenge or two as the city clerk that you think you'll be facing in the next term of council?
Well, thanks, Joe, for that question. I mean, there's lots of challenges. I could name quite a few, I think, but I'll take a moment to talk about the strong mayors thing in a second. But I think in terms of some of the things that we see from the clerk's point of view, I think that whatever is going on in the democratic fabric of our society at the moment is something that concerns us, whether it's either threats or violence against elected members of council or elected officials across the country, whether it's the deterioration of public discourse. These are things that haven't really quite arrived on our shore. Well, some of them have arrived on our shore, but we are trying to be prepared for that and understand how that's going to affect public discourse around civic issues in the coming while. So I'll squeeze that in as one of the things that is on our radar. But because I didn't get a chance to talk about the strong mayor power, I'll say a little bit about that. One of our challenges this term will be to integrate new powers for the mayor that have been just passed by the Legislative Assembly. And they are new powers to the mayor in 3 areas really quickly. One is the mayor will have the ability to advance provincial priorities, some provincial priorities which have yet to be set out in law, but we expect them to be in the area of housing and the services that support housing. And so the mayor will have two powers. One is he'll be able to bring matters before council that he or she thinks advances those priorities. The second is the ability to veto a decision of city council if the mayor believes that decision interferes with the advancing of provincial priorities. So that's totally new territory here, and for us. The second bundle of powers the mayor has is a wide range of governance and administrative governance powers. So we'll have the opportunity to determine the organizational structure of the public service. We'll have the opportunity to determine the committee structure of council that we talked about and showed you the slides of. It will now be up to the mayor to make changes to those. The ability to hire and fire senior public servants, the ability to appoint chairs of committees and chairs of local boards. So there's a bundle of things there that tip the balance towards the mayor that don't exist today. Many of the things I've just described are the domain of council at the moment. And then the last power he has is the ability to, or the requirement, the obligation to prepare and introduce the budget, the city's annual budget. And he or she will have some veto rights if the council makes amendments to the mayor's budget. So this is new territory for us. Don't bother asking me whether I think any of it's a good idea or not, because if you heard what I said at the very beginning as the clerk, our job right now is to implement that and to make those changes so that the city can be compliant with the law. And that's our focus in the next little while.
Yeah, so John, the clerk's office is boringly neutral in all these matters. However, you can ask me. You can ask you can ask your professors what they think, whether the strong mayor system is a better system or a worse system. They should be able to guide you, asking the right question, and you can come up with your own conclusion. Of course you can. Of course you can. Okay, over to folks here. Oh, there's a question right there.
Hi, so I'm Brandon from U of T, and I just have a couple questions towards you. And one of them is a 2-part question. How often do debates get heated in here in the chamber? And what is the most heated debate you guys have had?
Good question.
Well, I'll just.
And can I just say, better not to introduce your name. You might say where you're from, your institution, just to respect the direction that we've been given from our privacy office.
Well, at the risk of being overly dramatic, when I started in the clerk's office, the first 5 meetings I attended in this chamber, there was a police paddy wagon on the rooftop here for all 5 of those first meetings. So when I arrived, there were a lot of heated moments here, protests in the chamber, issues that were dividing the community. However, I will also say I consider that to be a good sign. I remember, sometimes members say to me, John, we need to do more about security, or we need to, well, obviously security is a concern, but we need to find a way that we don't have this passion expressed in the chamber. It's distracting, it's interfering with our meetings. And, my kind of view on it is when there's a lot of interest in the chamber, it's actually a good thing for democracy. So it does happen from time to time. There's no doubt about it. At the same time, of course, we want to balance security and make sure that there's safety for everyone who's participating in the debate.
But name a few of the big debates. I have a few that,
Well, taxis have already been mentioned.
taxis was a big one, taxis and Uber,
Yeah.
hot debate, packed council chambers.
We go back a number of years now, the future of water and wastewater treatment services, should that be privatized or not? A lot of privatization debates, solid waste privatization, what we should be doing with the garbage.
Garbage,
Is the
where
garbage
we put our
incinerated, or should it go to landfill, or those types of things.
Great, okay. We have one from our online friends. Maybe I'll direct this to Tracy. What are things that you don't like about your job and daily issues you want to change?
This is why they don't let me sit at the center table, because there's a whole bunch of extra buttons. This has one, I'm good. What I don't like about my job, I honestly, there's days that are challenging, but the challenge always brings opportunity. Honestly, there's nothing in particular that I could say I don't particularly care for. Sorry, the second part of the question, Joe? Oh, here it is. And daily issues you want to change. I think the one thing that's really important for me, and John actually touched on it with a little bit of a different theme. I think that through the pandemic, people's compassion for each other has changed a little bit. I don't know if we're as patient with each other as maybe we should be. And I find, and I think my concern will be that general feel doesn't permeate the relationship between the public service and our elected officials. There is a separation, and we both have very distinct jobs, and Kelly and John did a beautiful job at articulating that. But I think for me, it's making sure that we work together in our respective roles with respect, patience, and compassion. And, as well, I think, and again, John touched on it, the public discourse is great. Everything we do has, it requires public engagement. But I would prefer that it stay respectful and professional. And unfortunately, some of our city staff, we deal with issues that people are very polarized about and have very differing opinions about. Sometimes, and because we are so transparent and so public with some of these policy things, sometimes city staff, just in the day-to-day doings of their job, encounter some not very nice things said, typically on Twitter or elsewhere. So I'd really like to see that not continue, and that we have good forums for people to express their opinion, share their thoughts, but do it in a respectful, compassionate, and patient way. I think that would be my biggest issue.
Very good point. I know that some councillors, elected officials had demonstrations in front of their house. No one should have to put up with that. And the kinds of things that burn out councillors and on the elected side and senior officials too. Harassed at meetings has risen in the last little while. Maybe it's pandemic, maybe it's the echo chambers, who knows what it is, but it's not been pleasant. It's a tough time for democracy. The mic, right there, and then we're going to come up here, okay? After that, and then the professor. Okay, just so right there, here, then the professor, then Leslie.
Hi, thanks. Question from U of T. John had mentioned that he was a little worried about the fabric of democracy and issues like that. And just as a follow-up, I was wondering what measures are in place to prevent the politicization of the city clerk's office, and if there's any formal measures to do so, or if Toronto's just, and the governance structure is sort of relying on the goodwill of council and the clerk to try and respect those political norms, and if this is something we should be worried about.
Good question. And I'm going to encourage short answers because there seem to be a lot of questions coming up.
I guess we're just sort of crowdsourcing this answer here. I think there's a couple of things. I mean, well, first of all, I just told you about the mayor's powers. First, and one of the, among the positions that the mayor cannot hire or fire is the clerk. I'll just say that. So the Legislative Assembly has given some consideration to that, at least in the drafting of that bill. I think, it's sort of good training, good values. In the clerk's office, we attract people who are committed to democracy. We have long tenure in the city clerk's office, people who make a home in our office and stick with it for a long time. We're guided by a public service bylaw, which is in place, which sets out the responsibilities of public servants and also offers protection from a whistleblowing point of view. So it's not one thing, but there's a number of things that I think are in place to guard against the politicization of the public service in general and our office in particular.
Right here, you can press the yellow button. Give it a try.
Hello? Oh,
There you are.
hi. I guess my question is just, how have you seen the issues that are at the forefront of, the public's interest change as a result of, the pandemic and everything else that has happened as a result of that? Have you seen a change in kind of the issues that people are seeing as important?
Very good question. Tracy, that's yours. Come on up here, Tracy. It's okay.
Yeah, they put me at the non-speaking table. I think I'd go to the issue of housing, homelessness, and social equity. I think, it's always been there. And, I've been involved in recent times in dealing with the encampments in the parks. And that's a very, very difficult file to deal with. And there are a lot of varying opinions about that. But I think the positive side is the focus that we're putting on making sure that we are creating spaces as much as we can. We're advancing on supportive housing. Like, we're really focused, and I think the public generally expects that now. So, having a higher level of discussion about the services that we provide as all levels of government, mental health and addiction, I think we're woefully lack of supports contributing to a lot of these things. And I think that's more prevalent, in particular around mental health, I think are the things that the public more broadly are talking about maybe more than have in the past. I think that would be the thing that really sticks to me.
Great. This time's going quick. Professor Wee, Leslie.
I'm just going to try and push John gently in the issue of the strong mayor bill. And I'm asking this question as a concerned citizen and resident who may not be familiar with the intricacies of city government. But if we were to call upon your years of experience in neutrality, what would you say would be the strongest argument for and against the strong mayor bill?
The strongest arguments for and against. Yeah. I think probably your view on strong mayor depends on how you value time and debate, right? So I guess there's perhaps maybe like an efficiency argument or an efficiency dimension. So people maybe who look at City Hall look at it and say, oh, the decision making is slow, it's too deliberative. Look at that council meets for, as Kelly said, 2 days or 3 days sometimes. What a waste of time, or how are they using their time, and those types of things. So I suspect maybe if that's if the measure is how quickly the city can act and respond, then you might be more in favor of a strong mayor system. if you value deliberation, you value multiple points of view, compromise, those types of things. That tends to be traditionally in our system. I mean, I always say, that our system of government is excellent at optimizing solutions. It takes the sharp edges off things. It forces compromise for the people in this room to come to something that a majority can support. It is maybe not so good at doing things at the polls and acting fast, acting decisively, big actions. The things that if you were a benevolent dictator, you would do because you want to save time and get on with it. Let's get subways built. Let's get housing built. All these types of things. Too slow. But the trade-off is compromise. The trade-off is hearing multiple points of view from 25. We used to have 44. Those points of view. So I think maybe your feelings about it are guided by those types of considerations.
Great, thank you very much. We are running out of time. If you have more questions, I'm going to encourage you to write on a piece of paper and drop it with someone here at the front. And you know what? Our city staff are very good at answering those questions, and they'll be put as part of the package that will be sent out to your professors and answered by more or less mid next week. So feel free to hold those questions or even save them for next week. So we're going to start to wrap this up. This curriculum is all about student engagement. So in that spirit, I'd like to invite Kyle from York U to thank today's speakers. Kyle, and is Evan here? Oh, there you are. Okay, hurry it up down.
Just for the record, I have a microphone that works now. Okay. It wasn't me. Woo!
Press the yellow.
All right, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you found this as enjoyable as we did. My name is Evan, this is Kyle. We're both students in Professor Mihevic's class from York. On behalf of the Geography Department and the various other disciplines of students in attendance, we would like to thank all of the staff who worked tirelessly to put this all together and will continue to work on it over the semester to create an excellent learning environment for us as the students.
Yeah, reiterating that. Thank you guys very much. Like you said, I'm Kyle. I'm from the Cities Regions Planning Program, and we're representing a lot of different people here from a lot of institutions. So thanks everyone for being here. I was asked to have a few different points that we might have thought were interesting to highlight. I wanted to highlight first of all, what you brought up about the scope of the budget that we're looking at to really put into perspective the importance of city government, not as sort of this like ephemeral idea of local politics, but in real dollars. Like, 16 billion is considerable. And then to the point about the true range of responsibilities in the clerk's office, I think it's fascinating to a lot of us here who may not be in quite the same realm of politics that would be aware with that. So from helicopters to abandoned cemeteries, that's quite the range. But then also your responsibilities to help draft legislation while staying apolitical. I think it's a very difficult job, clearly, but very important. And finally, to say, again, emphasizing the power of local politics, especially in Toronto, the mayor being elected by the most number of electors of any post in Canada. That's a pretty significant statistic, and good to remember that, we're contributing to quite a large, important position here as voters. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Okay, so just forward looking a little bit, September 23rd, not 2 weeks, next week, we're back here again. The focus will be on what is a well-run city and intergovernmental affairs. We'll explore some of those ideas or concepts around the budget, and it will be one of the big themes. I also want to mention that Dr. Sarah Diamond, sitting right here, maybe you can wave. from OCAD University has organized a cross-institutional walking art tour of downtown Toronto and a discussion of public art. The tour begins at City Hall and one at OCAD and explores a number of public art works in the downtown core, their history and intent. We will have an opportunity to reflect on public art practices. If you're interested, please meet at City Hall doors on September 26th. And if you forgot to write some of this down, just meet Dr. Diamond right afterwards. If that date doesn't work, it's a religious holidays for some, then they're meeting on September 29th at OCAD U Butterfield Field at 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. That's it for today. You know what? Hang around. If this is your first time in City Hall, this is Council Chambers. There's a members lounge, very pretty view at the back there. Again, to emphasize this point, this is your City Hall as much as it is anyone else's. Have a great weekend. Explore the place a little bit. Thank you very much.
Sorry, guys, you guys are hosts. Can you close off the meeting? I can't shut down the meeting.